and I will talk about our Footlight technology and how it works. And Frederic will present the Linked Digital Future initiative that we're working on together. At Culture Creates, we believe arts and culture transform the individual. It invites us to look at our fellow human being with generosity and curiosity. If we ever needed that capacity, we need it today. For the past 2 days, we've talked about the digital world that we live in. That's all we've done. So how do we use technology to get people to the live performance? Anyone? Anyone? Because I think everyone in this room believes that arts and culture transform the individual. Do we think artificial intelligence has helped the findability and discoverability of live performing arts and events? What do we think?
Yes.
Oh! Oh! What? There's no, and I heard a yes.
Not yet. Film.
And not yet.
Film.
And what?
For movies.
For movies, that's a very, So our answer is kind of like mixed in this room. Right? And there's no consensus at the moment. I don't think. It's kind of, but I think, Gregory, I think you did a little experiment, did you not? Do you think you can share that with the room?
Certainly. All right. So how do you do an experiment to test this? I mean, we live in a supposedly AI-powered world. What is this doing to help us get people into the performing arts, into the live performing arts? I think it's a serious question that we can take a moment, and I'll try and click through a little experiment that I did. So I asked a question. Really, my experiment was to ask this question: is the actress Christine Beaulieu performing next month? So apparently, with AI, you can ask questions, you get answers. So where do I go to ask this question?
Alexa.
Alexa, very good. Yes, so let me start with Google. And I'm going to go to a couple of platforms, but let me start with Google. Who has seen this event finder of Google? It's actually not completely rolled out in Canada, but sometimes as soon as you start typing event, it'll trigger this new interface in Google, which is an interface that is AI-powered, right? So I started typing in this question of events Christine Beaulieu, and right away it throws me into this event finder, which shows me some events. Now I'm asking this last month, so I'm really interested in the month of March. So one of the positive things and the promises of AI is that you can actually specify months, like a time period, because this is not a series of web pages. This is supposed to be entities in a knowledge graph. So I specified next month, and I'm interested again in March. And this experience has shown me 3 dates in March. Now, already I can see the experience is starting to break down, because normally these would be pictures of the event. Okay, but I keep going. So I select one of the dates, the 24th, and I don't really get much descriptive data or metadata. I'm getting a description from Ticket City, and I only see ticketing platforms here. So something seems to be not quite right. I click on one of these multiple ticketing platforms, and I realize that this is a secondary market. I'm seeing prices of up to $400 for this live event that I know is probably $45 for real. So what's going on here? As a user trying to discover this event, I'm really dropped out at this point. This is not, something's not right. So let me go somewhere else and ask this question somewhere else. So there's a couple of platforms that I know of. For example, Sortu in Quebec. They have one event on the 30th of March. Okay, those are the same dates that I saw before. Let me go to another place, Facebook. Well, Facebook has a bunch of days, but it also has different dates in March than the Google platform where I asked the question first. So I'm wondering really what's going on now. Let me try Endroit. Okay, Wow gives me some rich multimedia, some images and some interviews, but it only has actually one date as well, whereas I know there are multiple dates in March. La Vitrine, the platform for specifically performing arts in Montreal, shows me 2 dates, the 30th of March and the 31st of March. Again, I'm not sure what is going on and why I can't just get the answer to my question, which is, where is she showing in March? I noticed in hotels that concierge, sometimes they use Eventful. There are a couple of platforms, but I actually did this test. I walked into a hotel, asked the concierge, what's happening, what do you recommend in dance, what do you recommend I go see? So they opened up this website, and if I did this with this current question, and I get 2 events in March again that are different, and the place that it is, sorry, this is Saint-Lambert, yeah, so that I realized that the data and the place are actually wrong in this platform. So not only is it incomplete, but it's wrong. And here I get this, yeah, so here de Montagne is actually in Sainte-Thérèse, which is a completely different place. So this is a summary of this experiment I did, asking my question, and the different platforms that had not only incomplete metadata on the events, but a poor quality of metadata. Often the metadata, meaning the description, the photos, the dates, were coming from third parties, some player in between that is not the arts organization, not the presenter, not the producer, not even the venue that was actually getting this information into the web of data. So I think right now, I would say that the answer is no. This is not helping in a consistent and in an authoritative way. AI is not answering my question at all in a satisfactory way. So what can we do to fix this problem? And this is where we start to look at what Footlight can help with. But let me step back to Tim Berners-Lee. So who's heard about Tim Berners-Lee, right? He's the inventor of the web. He actually proposed a solution to this problem way back. He was suggesting that instead of creating all of these platforms that have siloed data, why don't we publish metadata in a public place, in a place where everyone can actually read, where even algorithms and computers and humans can read this information and it be shared with everyone. So we sort of took this to heart and we said, well, okay, so the desired outcome of what is what? The desired outcome, if this metadata is published in a public place, everyone can read it and everyone can access it. Except maybe the ticketing platforms who don't care about the events that they don't have tickets for. But it's interesting because they may actually be interested in paying for some of this public metadata or this quality metadata. So that's a different story, but all the other platforms would benefit and would be very eager. Except in Canada, we often, in public events, we don't publish this metadata in a public, open way. It's just not available. And that's one of the issues that we have with the digital transformation of the arts, is that there are things that we could be doing, but that we're not necessarily doing. And this is causing all sorts of issues. So at Culture Creates, what we do is we say, well, your website has this information. We can work with your website, convert that into metadata, descriptive metadata that computers understand, that algorithms understand, so it can then be more discoverable and it can be used by algorithms, etc., to bring more people to see your event, right, which is the ultimate goal. So here's an example of what we did last summer with Canadian Stage, where they have their website. So they use Footlight, and Footlight converts the website, the event, the descriptive metadata. I'm not talking about transactional data or private data, I'm talking about the public data about the event. And it converts it into computer code, technically JSON-LD, but it's the type of data that computers need to read to be able to add your events to the platforms. And of course, the only thing we really want to do is to keep the arts organization in the loop, is to review this, okay? But then we realize this is really hard to review. So what we do is we convert it back to a more human, readable form. so it can be reviewed. And our goal was to make it as simple as possible to avoid data entry. So the idea of Footlight is that it does 90% of the work for you, but it's crucial that we keep in the loop the arts organization, the people who know really the humans, keep them in the loop to guide these algorithms, right? So that we have the right quality data as the end result. And that's really key. And it gets more key because here's an example of Footlight, which is really a metadata editor, right? You can basically say everything is good, or you can flag an individual piece of information if it's wrong. And sometimes the algorithms get it wrong, right? So you want to intervene at that stage. And there's a lot of information that you can do to make it even more findable that Footlight automates. It can connect concepts in your text using natural language processing to entities in Wikipedia and Wikidata. So it's doing some of the work that algorithms do, like Google does actually, but it's letting you see into the process so you can guide it and correct it. And you can add, sometimes it's quite complicated, but an event can be organized by multiple arts organizations, is often the case. So it's important to review how the computers see your site and add or remove links so that it is quality data. And one of the things that always is interesting is you add one link here to different arts organizations. And what you're doing is creating that relationship, that connection. So it rapidly becomes a very rich data set. You have, when you connect to arts organizations, those arts organizations have metadata as well, description, address, location. So you're creating a web of data that shows the interconnectedness of the arts sector. And you can add multimedia as well, pictures. You can select which picture you want to put out there, right, of your event. You can connect videos, you can connect, of course, reviews if you desire. And then with this work, disambiguation is a key point. It's the Tom Rooney actor that is the lead in this play, not the Tom Rooney, the politician. Okay, so disambiguation. And sometimes the algorithms get it wrong. So here, 90% of the work can be done by Footlight, but it's super key to take ownership of your metadata, realize that's how the computer world and the platforms see your events in your arts organization, and review it. And then you can publish it, and you can publish it in different places. But the first place that's fairly urgent is your own website. Okay, so we give you a little code snippet, it's a JavaScript snippet. You can place it on your website, you can see what's being published to your website, so that the algorithms and the computers will be able to understand your events and understand the complex web of partnerships that are going on in the arts sector. So here's a result with Canadian Stage. You can see that quite rapidly over a period of weeks, because it's not instant, but just with Google and Google searches, you get a lot richer. The photos are starting to show up, you get the rich snippets, which is just the beginning. But in the knowledge graph of Google, they're still linking all the websites together, but now Canadian Stage is the authority, right? Now it's their description that shows up. It's now their website where you can go to get more information. And they're not going to remove the other, because Google's trying to include everyone. But Google wants the authority, the authoritative answer. And Google knows that it comes from the people here in this room. It comes from the arts organizations, not from that secondary ticketing platform, not from meetup.com, that's doing great things, but that may often show up right now. If you don't do anything about your metadata, you're going to get the metadata from Meetup, and whoever's writing that will have that answer that AI is giving you. So if anything, I want to leave you with this one concept, whether it's with Footlight or with any other tool. Be conscious of your metadata, claim your metadata. The arts sector, I think, is at a stage where if we do this well, we can actually show and lead other industries as well in claiming this. And it's possible to do with Footlight or other tools, but let's hopefully see that there's urgency in doing this. And I'll pass it back to Tammy.
Thank you. Thank you, Frederic. With quality metadata, we can build all sorts of collaborative projects. Someone can build a chatbot, and here is an example.
Let's get Get the test version of Culture Creates.
Hello.
What's happening at the National Arts Center?
At the NAC, there are 6 more performances in November. Are you interested in dance, music, workshop, or theater?
Dance.
OED Love is being performed this Thursday and Friday. Would you like to hear more?
Yes.
Highly original, LEV's inventive duo Sharon Isle and Guy Behar team up with techno trailblazer DJ Ori Lichtek to create a raw, visceral new work inspired by slam poet Neil Hilborn's sensational text. Note partial nudity.
Actually, can I know more about music?
There are 4 music events coming up in the next few weeks. Zuckerman and Beethoven, Choir, the Jan Arden Christmas Concert, and Diana Krall.
Tell me more about Diana Krall.
On December 1st and 2nd, Turn Up the Quiet World Tour reunites Diana with Tommy Lee Puma.
Are there any tickets available?
Yes, there are tickets available. Would you like to buy some now?
I would like to buy them later.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Goodbye. So here I was able to get the answer a lot quicker to find out what's happening at the National Arts Center in the coming days. So we work with the National Arts Center to structure the metadata, and this became possible. There are a lot of people in this room that are working on projects that if you had access to quality metadata, you can build all types of different user experiences. We can also build an innovative model of collective ownership. When arts organizations use Footlight, they not only become the digital authority of their own metadata, but together, the arts sector generates a valuable mass of usable, connected data called the knowledge graph. And we believe that arts organizations that contribute data to a knowledge graph should have access to that knowledge graph, which is not the case today. You know, a knowledge graph does exist, but it's owned by Google. So we can shift the power of closed, exclusive data access held by multinational tech companies to one that is open and accessible to everyone in the Canadian arts sector. And with access to valuable data, the arts will be able to generate and leverage new opportunities. In an AI-powered world, the knowledge graph is becoming more and more valuable. And we can build partnerships. So like the one that we have with CAPACOA, supported by Canadian Heritage, and I'm going to ask Frederic to talk about the linked digital future.
Thank you, Tammy. But before I talk about the linked digital future, I have to tell you what's at stake here. Gregory actually laid it out fairly well. And most people who hear what Gregory says about Footlight feel some kind of relief. I'm good. I've got a solution. My problem is solved. Well, the thing is, with discoverability, it's a bit like the same thing as immunization. Until like a certain proportion of the population uses it, you don't have group immunity. So in this same thing with it's true. We need a significant number of people to get on board so that we have a network effect that will provide the same advantage as group immunity. So, Akoulina actually set the stage really well for us yesterday. She told us about the need to move from competition to collaboration, and that it has to begin with identifying systems level issue. Well, discoverability is definitely one of those, and that's why the partnership with Culture Creates and eventually with others in the room will be very important. Let's talk about Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel is a very intriguing concept. It bears the name of a popular comic character, Captain, with the name of a brand, and associates it with characteristic that belongs to another superhero owned by DC Comics. There cannot be anything more ambiguous than that. And she's a woman. Great! So, in the world of discoverability, this is probably one of the most complex things to get across search engines. Yet, if you look for Captain Marvel right now on Google or whatever device you want, you're going to find it very, very easily. Not quite the same for Canadian Stage. So, Canadian Stage and other arts managers are quite at a disadvantage compared to Captain Marvel. So, what you see on your screen right now is showtimes. Very easy to find. And regardless of where you search for, you're going to find different showtimes. And if you're actually traveling and you're moving, you won't even get showtimes. You'll get other information to keep you busy until you're settled in a place and you can actually see showtimes. Why does Captain Marvel do so well on the internet right now compared to the arts? One reason is identifiers. Captain Marvel, like any other commercial movie, has an IMDb identifier in this international movie database. So that removes all ambiguity when you look for Captain Marvel. It also links this ID to a number of rich other data sets, to all other contents related to Captain Marvel, be it trailers, be it articles. All of them are linked to this IMDb database by the virtue of this unique ID. Problem is, we do not have a unique persistent identifier for live performing arts productions. It does not exist. So, for Google, for Alexa, it's not possible to easily recognize that different performances of the same production in two cities are actually part of the same entity called a tour. Sometimes they can figure it out if enough information is consistent in both places, and if metadata is existent in both places, they might recognize that the two of them belong to the same entity called a production on tour. But until it does that on a consistent basis, it's not possible for Google to understand that the buzz created by a show in Sainte-Thérèse is predictor of a buzz that will happen later on in a Rwanda or any other city. So we're missing out on the most important thing that impacts people's decision on buying a ticket or not, which is word of mouth. What do other people say or feel about this cultural offer? So Captain Marvel comes up at the top of the search results, not only because of the ID. It comes out so clearly, so strongly, because of other people's behavior. Because people have been searching for it, there's a lot of buzz around it, and it's creating a history of search behavior and recommendation behavior that sort of self-enhances itself and creates what Captain Marvel is on the online world right now. So we had a short example that Tammy showed with a search on Google for a show using Culture Creates. It works great with Culture Creates, but it will not work out for most other performing arts performances that don't have structured metadata. And the problem is, those intelligent personal assistants right now, Google, Alexa, and eventually Siri, they are basing their recommendations on a number of things. First, is there available metadata, a unique ID, and other descriptive metadata? But then it asks itself, have other people searched for it? Have my user, whose profile I'm currently building in my database, has this user searched for performing arts events in the past? The problem is, right now, we cannot search for performing arts events on these intelligent personal assistants. And as long as we are incapable of doing that, these assistants are building a user history in which the performing arts have little to no real estate. So the longer we wait, the more the curve, the steeper the mountain will be when we finally have our metadata in order. So the solution does not lie in competition, it lies in collaboration. So Canadian Stage presents up to 8, sometimes 9 performances per week at a maximum. And Sundays and Mondays are usually always dark nights. Movie theaters, 50 plus films per week easily, and sometimes 80 plus. So we can already see a difference in scale. And Netflix, well, you can watch any film you want, anywhere, on any device. So there's no competition there with Netflix. We're not in the same league at all. However, if we add Canadian Stage to all other theater companies in Toronto and the dance companies, we suddenly build up something that looks like a scale. And until we have that scale, consumers have way more other entertainment options than the performing arts. So let's have a bit of an ecosystem view of the performing arts. Can't make much sense of it, eh? Well, the truth is, the people whose work is described on this figure can't make much sense of it either. Why? Because they spend most of their days shipping or sending via email Word documents, PDF documents that are eventually outdated because you've emailed it, but oh gosh, I forgot something, and then you change your document, but it's too late. The person at the other end has started using outdated information already. That's the world we live in right now, and that's a real problem. And actually, I shouldn't make fun of this chart because the fellow who designed it, Jean-Robert Bisaillon, a good colleague of mine who I respect a lot, has spent a great deal of time trying to schematize the information exchange in the performing arts. Here's another ecosystems view. This is a representation of a value chain. Typically, value chains are presented in a much more simple linear fashion, beginning with creation, production, distribution, and consumption. This one sort of works backward from the demand to the supply. Usually they're presented the other way around, but still, it's roughly the same thing. This is the solution that we need. We need to move away from the traditional closed proprietary database to a linked open data world. What it requires is two things. A semantic layer. We need to be able to understand one another, and we need to be able to enable machines to understand what a live performance is. Right now, machines can know that there's an event in Sainte-Thérèse with the kids in Beaulieu called Gemidro. Does Alexa actually understand what a live performance is? I doubt it. We live in this world. For us, it's almost innate to us. We understand it viscerally. Machines have no clue. We need to help them out. And that means employing common language, adopting international, globally unique, persistent identifiers. It means also storing our data in different ways. So instead of lugging it up in a database that will belong only to me, that I will need to connect to another database with an API and then eventually push the information, but not have actual capacity to exchange information back and forth, we need to change and go into the linked open data world, which requires a different set of technologies. Okay, and but we won't go there today. The point is, we need to start doing things very differently. Right now, we're focused on creating new applications all the time. Until the foundations are there, I posit that we're wasting our energy. This ought to be the priority. Are you in? But then you wonder, so how do we do that exactly? Do you have a plan? Well, we are building the plane as we fly. We've called the plane A Link to Digital Future. So what we need is first a plan. So we have commissioned an action research project on semantic technologies, which is being conducted by consultants in the Bern University of Applied Science. I have a very wise advisory committee guiding the project, which includes, among other people, Margaret Lam here. We will be prototyping as well. So Culture Creates is one of our prototyping partner. They are, as I said, in the consumption market. Rideau, which would be the provincial equivalent to CAPACOA for the province of Quebec, is our prototyping partner for the production market. We don't have any prototyping partner for the laborers and professionals market, so it's up for taking. Then we are fully aware that the arts sector needs guidance. Linked open data is something very complex. We can't expect people to become literate in linked open data right away. So we are developing a digital navigation program which will be delivered regionally by Atlantic Presenters Association, Mass Culture, and the BC Alliance for Arts and Culture. There is currently a request for qualifications for coaches who will eventually be delivering these services for us. It's open until April 1st, and that's on my website, so that needs to be circulated. And we will also be, as part of the action research, be releasing our entire work on use cases for the exchange of data in the performing arts. We'll be putting it out in a Google Doc, which you can edit, comment, and if somehow we missed important ways that you use data and that it should be on our radar, that's your opportunity to tell us, so that when we do this plan, this roadmap for rolling out linked open data, we're sure that your reality is taken into account. That's it.
Are involved in rolling out this initiative in order to begin engaging the people who are ready to jump in, who are ready to be on board?
Well, first we needed a carrot, and I think that the technology developed by Culture Creates, the Footlight technology, is the right thing to catch people's attention, because it triggers an immediate reaction. Oh, there's something that will be useful to me. And then when we have this attention, then we can talk about this other stuff. The action research will be critical. We need a collective game plan for open data. It's not about just us in the room, it's not about us in Canada, it's about the world. We need to identify as many opportunities to work collaboratively on unique IDs. We need to start populating Wikidata with our information. And so this action research project will be quite critical. We're hoping to release this first report in June or July, early enough to possibly influence those of you who might be applying to the Digital Strategy Fund, because ultimately that's one of the main goals. We want as many of these Digital Strategy Fund applications to include elements of linked open data that partake in the same global linked open data ecosystem.
So we've got some questions from the room here. One of the questions is affordability, is based around affordability. So what's the affordability of tech like Footlight?
Our premise is we're developing Footlight to be as cheap as possible. It will all depend on government funding, essentially.
Are you for-profit or non-profit?
We are a for-profit organization. So I'm going to give a really quick sort of description of my background. I'm a career arts manager, traditional arts administrator, who quit my job to be in a startup incubator, and I actually understand what it really takes to come up with a digital idea that is for the sector, to transform the sector. It requires my years of experience being an arts administrator, but it also requires the limitation of having a for-profit company. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think that that constraint is needed to come up with the idea of Footlight. Had I could have easily been the director of touring and guest companies at Les Grands Canadiens. I would have convinced my boss at the time, Alain Dassiger, hey, I have a digital strategy project. And could have thought about Culture Creates, but my #1 responsibility would have been to my institution. It would be, what does Les Grands Canadiens get out of it? That would be #1. So my lens through which to build the project would be skewed. So I needed to quit my job at the institution, pitch myself into create and take the real risk of starting a startup enterprise. To do Footlight as a for-profit company, to but have been able to come up with this solution. And it's a lot of hard work in asking the right question. And I actually think, as an arts administrator, the role is to bring resources to the arts sector. It was to quit my cushy job, even though my family is really like, what? Is the most responsible thing I could have done as an arts administrator, because I think this is where we need to go. As arts managers and arts administrators, we need to have that experience. So I feel like an outlier as a true entrepreneur. I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, and taking on the full risk. I am very fortunate, though, to have a co-founder that is a real entrepreneur from the startup in the tech world as a partner. I'm really lucky. We should be all thanking our stars, because he is now part of us in the arts sector. What I don't like is how, as arts organizations, we hire tech companies to build things for us, and they're just going to build exactly what we tell them to build, without any sort of critical thinking. So we actually have an engineer within our fold to ask those critical questions that we need.
Can I just tag on something? I'm very lucky to be working with Tammy. It goes both ways. And I think it's important that I've been immersed with Tammy, and since a little kid, I love the performing arts. It does impact the way we're design thinking this project, the way we're working. The values and some of the constraints are key in the way, like, we're going forward together to choose technologies, to choose a more inclusive approach, trying to be open and share, and really include every person in the ecosystem, whether you're a small or large player in the arts. So I think that's key in our going forward. That may not have happened if we weren't working so closely together, and that I'm just glad to have a chance to work really close with the arts sector.
Yeah, so National Ballet of Canada, or a tiny little theatre company in a rural region somewhere in Canada, it makes no difference for us. The technology is really agnostic that way. So it doesn't matter where the data comes from, we just need the data. You know, so I kind of like this project because that rural theatre company is equal to the National Ballet of Canada in Footlight technology, equalizes that.
Another question that came from the board was, is there anyone else doing parallel work? Is there competition in this field right now? Or are you guys the lone riders?
Well, this has been the question on my mind for a couple of years. Definitely, Culture Creates have been one of the front runners, and actually, they're not only front runners in Canada, they are front runners in the entire world, and we're lucky to have them here, which enables us to take a leadership position in the world. Elsewhere in the world, there is some work on metadata being done in France and Belgium and Switzerland. And we are currently working with people in Switzerland, and we'll be also making sure that we are aligning fully with the work being done in France and Belgium, and hopefully that together we're part of the very same linked open ecosystem.
Question from the floor here.
Thank you for such a clear and yet complex presentation. It was really, really strong. I have two questions. The first one's for Gregory. I think the Canadian stage is absolutely key, and I think that you need Brendan or someone from Canadian stage up here with you making your pitch because I think that will be really important in the future. So, did Tartuffe sell better than their previous shows because of the metadata? That's my first question, then I have another one.
Okay, well, we went online just as Tartuffe was ending, so I can't say, but we are closely following the metrics. And I'd say that you can see a nice curve of increase with the metadata on their site of click-through rates increasing and the click-through quality increasing. But I would venture to say that this is still the early game, and that it's a small percentage of the overall traffic going to the site. So it's key that we start now and position ourselves now, and the sector will see much more benefits than just an increased click-through rate. I think that's just the immediate benefit, and we like to say there's an immediate benefit. Do it now, claim your metadata, put it on your website or other places. And it's not that intimidating to do. We're trying to make it really simple. But also there is the longer term benefit when we talk, with CAPACOA, and we talk about being able to be discovered throughout the world and even locally, using all this advance in AI to benefit the arts sector, to get more people in to see the show. I think it's a long-term game.
Sure, of course.
Oops, can I just add to that? And I think we talked about it before. I think I talked about it with you. I'm not so sure, but I've talked about it with other people in this room already. AI is a baby right now. And I think the big picture is the responsibility of the arts and culture sector to create metadata to feed AI today. Because AI is evolving fast and it's growing fast, and it's like if it grows to be a teenager, I have a teenage son, my influence is done. But I read to him every single day since he was a baby. He has a great memory, and I believe in early childhood education, early childhood development. AI is in early childhood development, and we have a responsibility to feed AI. So we need to create the metadata to do that.
Can I just add one little tidbit on that? Is that it twists the story around to, it's not that the arts sector needs to go back to the starting and learn about all this new technology. It's that actually the technology needs to learn about us. We need to train AI about what we're doing in the arts. That's a different way to look at it.
Another question from the floor?
Frederic, I was really struck by something you said about moving from an API-based logic to linked open data. Sort of, I imagine, I haven't really heard this criticism so much before, but I sort of am thinking about the API as sort of like, you have this closed room, this closed house, and then you sort of decide to tack a door on it afterwards. Whereas with linked open data, it's, as I understand it, it necessitates a whole rethink of the technology. So I feel like because historically this sector works very much piecemeal, piece by piece, we're sort of more, it's difficult to get from where we are to where we need to go. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, it is a significant leap. It's a shift in paradigm. So you described the API very well. You build something with lots of walls and gates, and they're all closed, and then eventually you open up a door to send out some information and possibly receive some information under certain conditions. But there's no real two-way communication all the time. You have to, it's being mediated. In the linked open data world, anyone can have access to the information real time. Now, this creates another set of questions. Well, what about information that is confidential, private information? Well, of course, you cannot use linked open data for everything. What it begs as a question is, are we ready to open things up, which means giving ownership, giving up control over things that I like to control? And that is probably the most radical shift in mental scheme that this project is proposing. And it could actually be its most important outcome. What if the best thing that we delivered was not discoverability, but a new way of thinking about collaboration in the arts? That's one of my hopes.
Is there a way that we can use this to communicate or collaborate with each other at the point before we're ready for it to go public? Like the point where I'm wanting to collaborate is where I'm thinking about bringing an artist, I don't know if I can afford them, I want to find out if there are colleagues who can tour with them. Or, you know, I've got the description an artist has given me, I don't think it's going to connect to my audience, but, you know, maybe I Google my friend in Victoria who's presented it and I go, whoa, that's a really great, I mean, I would love to be able to do those kinds of things in a way that's more efficient than my current way of emailing my colleagues and asking them.
Definitely, the hope for a linked open data, a linked digital future is that the entire value chain can become integrated and become interoperable that way. Some activities will still require you to contact people because typically data is not finalized, crystallized, and put out there for sharing until it reaches a certain stage. So in the early stages of a creative process, sometimes the thoughts are not even fully formed, so there's no real metadata that you can generate just yet about it. But eventually there will be many opportunities, many possibilities that will spin off from linked open data. And actually those possibilities are endless, completely endless.
Question on governance. Could you talk a little bit more about the governance models that you explored when you were in the development phase?
For us at Footlight, so at Culture Creates, we're focused on developing the technology to sort of structure and sort of generate and link that metadata. But that metadata belongs to the arts organizations. So we end up with a knowledge graph, a knowledge base, like IMDb, of what's happening in the arts in Canada. Our starting point, which is very different than what Frederic is doing, we're starting with the events. You know, the shows that are coming up in the future. We're not interested in archives, we're not interested in what's happening in the past, or the things that are not publicly available. But we will have a knowledge graph of what's happening in the arts in Canada. That knowledge graph, or knowledge base of everything in Canada, needs to be housed, I think, in collective ownership, and we think cooperative is the best thing. It can't be housed by us. It can't be housed by a single arts organization, or even an association, or CAPACOA. So our fairest way of housing it is a cooperative of arts organizations, or individuals, or people from the arts sector. If it was held by us, it won't be protected. We could be bought out as a private company. And then that knowledge graph will be closed and proprietary, which is what happened to, what was that? Google bought out a knowledge graph, sort of a company way back when they were building knowledge graphs, and it was open and public. Google came around and bought them and closed it down.
It was Freebase, was it?
Freebase, exactly. I just couldn't remember the name. So Freebase, you know, so the bigger picture for me, and this is subversive, is that we are doing the same thing as Google. We're building our own knowledge graph for ourselves that we have access to, the arts sector. No, yes, I'm an arts manager, arts administrator, I'm from the arts sector, I consider myself, us together in this room. We're gonna build it for the arts sector. It doesn't belong to Culture Creates, it belongs to the arts sector in a cooperative. Then you have access to it.
We've got a question at the back, and then I have a question that's actually gonna link to this afternoon's collaborative theme park of conference.
So, earlier it seemed as though that Google had reached its end, and now specialty search engines will take over where Google has left off. What was the name of the knowledge graph that they shut down, or that they bought?
Freebase.
They bought Freebase, and Freebase was integrated in the Google Knowledge Graph, most of it. Part of it was, however, passed on to Wikipedia and became Wikidata, which is a knowledge base that has lots of potential for the sector still.
So is there a way to get Google to cooperate with what you're doing so that it shows up on a Google search engine less than a week when it's crawled?
What's the question?
Is there a way to get Google to cooperate with you so that what you're doing?
There's I think, a two-part answer. today, immediately, you can use a Google tool to trigger a recall right away. And they have a simple, called Google Search Console. So that's today. You can add our code snippet on your site and press the button to ask Google to look at what you've put right away. The second answer, though, is when there's a critical mass, and the idea here is to work together. Every data source can be linked together. Once we get to a critical mass as a sector, then we can talk with Google directly and maybe create some more interesting opportunities. So I think it's a two-step process.
Thank you. An example of that is Music Brains. So they sell, they have a tight relationship with Google, but Music Brains is a massive metadata in the music industry. And they sell their metadata back to Google. Google's interested in structuring and building a knowledge graph of the world. So, they're not paying attention to the little art sector. So, if we can do it for ourselves. And Google, if you use Google structured tools, you can structure your own metadata on your own website by yourself. They don't talk about the linking. So anytime we use a Google tool, Facebook tool, or any other tool that the multinationals give us to make us appear better on their search engines, we're building their knowledge graph, not our own. So we're going, let's build our own knowledge graph, and we'll share it with Google. So we kind of give up our value when we use their tools.
Hi. So you mentioned that you're not interested in archives. You mentioned that you're not dealing in archives. So what happens to the metadata as we move forward into the future and more shows happen?
We'll end up with a history. We will have that. But
so we're looking backwards. We're starting to build those archives as of now, and moving forward.
Because a lot of people come up to us and go, "Hey, I'm a museum, and we have 20,000 objects in our collection. Do you want to, in our archives, would you like to structure?" And we go, "No."
Actually, this is one of the advantages of being in the business of an intangible cultural object that is the live performing arts. We do not absolutely have to start archiving past information. We can do it as of now, which makes us much lighter and nimbler than artifacts-based organizations.
I'm just curious, what is the greatest source of resistance, do you think, to this shift? It's, like you said, it's subversive, it's radical, it's paradigmatic. It sounds like the most difficult thing is to change people's thinking about how to manage the arts and how to move forward and adopt this technology and abandon the thing that they know. Is that something, like, how do you give a plan for how to deal with that kind of people's, making it more comfortable, I guess, for people to move into this new paradigm?
I think I'm going to talk about how we built our tool, then I'm going to speak to the resistance afterwards. I think that's the reason why we built the tool, to make it really easy to use, simple to use. In fact, the version that you saw, I think we can even make it simpler. So we're really focusing on doing 90% of the work. I don't think it's the job of a Bally company to, oh my God, I need to understand what semantic web is and how to model an ontology and taxonomy. No, it's not an arts organization's or an artist's job. You have other things that you need to do. So we make the tool as simple as possible. We take all the complexity out. If there are going to be updates throughout the year, we'll do the updates. And we're focused on making a tool that's one tool for everyone to use, and that's easy to use. So we try to circumvent that resistance. Hey, can you model your website like this? Can you make sure that you use this standard and these words? So we link meeting to meeting. We understand what people are saying and we link it to the same meeting, but we still allow organizations to use the language that they want. So we're not coming up and going, you need to use this standards and change the way you do things. So we're trying to make it simple, going sideways. And we want to focus on developing the tool. So funding and the hoops and That's the biggest resistance that we have.
And actually, which leads me to commend Canadian Heritage for having come up on board the first before any other funders, and very generously. So they have seen the potential of this. So thank you very much, Canadian Heritage. Speaking of other obstacles, many business models in the arts sector and elsewhere are based on control, on gathering, controlling, and repackaging information in a way that allows you to capture value out of that information. Linked open data implies giving up a degree of control over the information, which will be disruptive to certain business models, including in the arts service organization sector. And I do not have a clear answer to give to those folks who will tell me, well, this is going to disrupt my business model. I do not have any clear replacement to propose just yet, but I know that keeping with the status quo is not an option either.
So my question is twofold. You've mentioned that you wanted this structure to be based, have international standards. So who will decide on the descriptors and the identifiers, the whole language for the arts sector? And how will you deal with the fact that we have at least 2 official languages?
I'm going to speak in our case because we're dealing with, and you can add to it as well, because we're dealing with public metadata. The descriptive metadata comes from the arts organization website. So if they want to change the description, change it on your website. So our source of information for us is on the arts organization website. We're making, so what I'd like about our tool is that the arts organization becomes the authority of what their data, metadata is going to look like.
And much of the semantic web is the outcome of work of communities of practice. So it was built by the people who used it. This is what we're attempting to do. In terms of the language aspect, and not only official languages, we have to also think now about indigenous languages as well. With globally unique persistent identifiers, there's no need to use concrete names that are in English only. We can just have an alphanumeric ID that has many descriptors in many different languages. So we can be totally language agnostic and language sensitive at the same time.
Yeah, machine readable code is machine readable code. It's not English, French, German, Chinese. It's just code. The national or international language of mathematics.
But I will say this about languages. We cannot think of languages only as interface for communication of concept, because each language has cultural aspects to it. Language constructs meaning, constructs the way that we think, and so we have to be very mindful of that and not only think of language as an interface.
Just to add to that, I think there's an opportunity here to model and find good models for the arts sector by working in the arts sector. I think that there's an opportunity for the arts sector to be a leader in modeling its own activities. So I think there's room to have an impact here. If I look at the current vocabularies of schema.org, for example, they're very poorly adapted to the performing arts. So we have an opportunity here to actually have an influence in the way that we train AI for the many years and decades to come. And it's a short window that's open now.
And in practical terms, that is not for the individual arts organization to take on. I just want to add that because people go, oh my God, I got to do that. No, which is the reason why we're making a tool, one for all, use the language that you want on your website. We're going to link to the meeting. We're speaking with the experts in the University of Bern to figure, okay, how can we link, they say this, we're going to link it to the same meaning. And identifiers are identifiers that exist out there, like ESNI and also Wikidata. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
All right, well, thank you all very much for engaging in the dialogue. This has really been great to see the whole room engaged with questions here. And thank all 3 of you for generosity of spirit, and not just in answering questions today, but also, I think, in a philosophical approach to the solution that you're